This is a case from the close of the 19th century in a country where formal law, religious authority, and inherited belief continued to exist side by side. In Ireland, particularly in rural districts, daily life was governed not only by labor and church observance, but also by a body of traditional explanations for illness, misfortune, and sudden change. Such beliefs were neither concealed nor marginal. They circulated openly within families and among neighbors, forming part of the ordinary framework through which events were interpreted. County Tipperary inland and largely agricultural reflected this social condition with little variation. Roads were narrow, houses widely spaced, and the rhythm of local life was seldom interrupted by influences beyond the immediate parish. In the townland of Bailiff Vad Lee near Molina, the landscape consisted of small holdings set among hedged fields and remnants of older earthworks. One dwelling, modest in size and construction, stood on ground locally associated with an ancient rath, thus it functioned in practice as a working household rather than a site of remark. The house belonged to the laboring class with a central hearth that served as the main source of heat and light, and adjoining rooms used for sleeping and storage. Daily activity centered on this space, and the passage of time was marked by meals, prayers, and the tending of the fire. It was here that Bridget Cleary, aged 26 years, was born. Bridget Boland on the 19th of February, 1869. From an early age, she learned the trades of dressmaking and millinery. These skills were acquired outside the household and put to practical use within the district and nearby areas. Through sewing and the sale of finished garments, she earned money in her own right. Testimony later described her as competent in this work and accustomed to handling payment directly, a position that set her apart from many women of similar background at the time. Bridget married Michael Cleary in the late 1880s, following a period during which both had lived and worked in Clon. After their marriage, the couple returned to Bailiff Lee, where they settled close to Bridget's family. The union produced no children, following the death of her mother. Bridget assumed responsibility for aspects of the household while continuing her sewing work for neighbors and clients in nearby areas. She was known to travel short distance in connection with this work and was regarded as regular in her habits. In the early days of March 1895, Bridget Cleary fell ill and remained largely indoors. As the illness persisted beyond its first days, attention within the household turned from routine care to more deliberate measures. Bridget Cleary remained largely confined to the house at Ballyvadley, and the rhythm of daily life adjusted around her condition. But a local physician, Dr. Cre, was summoned and attended at the house. After examining Bridget, he diagnosed bronchial illness accompanied by fever and prescribed medicine. Accordingly to later testimony, the doctor stated that her condition did not appear unusual for the season and that he did not regard it as immediately dangerous. Instructions were given regarding rest and the administration of the prescribed treatment. That keeping with local custom, religious attention followed medical care. Father Ryan, the parish priest, visited the house and administered the sacraments. He later stated that Bridget was capable of conversation and answered him rationally. His visit was recorded as calm and orderly, and no disturbance was noted during his time in the house. Such attendance was common in cases of extended illness and did not in itself suggest alarm. In Ballyva, illness was not always understood as a purely physical matter, and where recovery was delayed, other causes were sometimes discussed alongside medical ones. Such discussions were neither formal nor hidden. They formed part of ordinary speech in the district and were often framed as possibility rather than certainty. Within this framework of belief, reference was made to an explanation long familiar in Irish folklore, the taking of a living person by fairies and the leaving behind of a substitute in their place. According to this belief, fairies were said to seize human beings, most often women, children, or those weak in bileness, and to confine the true person within a fairy dwelling, commonly identified with ancient ring furs scattered across the countryside. What remained in the household was believed to be a changing, outwardly similar but altered in nature. Such a substitute was thought capable of imitation, without truth. It might speak, answer questions, or resemble the person taken, yet fail to respond properly to remedies or religious care. Prolonged sickness, resistance to treatment, altered speech or manner, and behavior that departed from accepted domestic roles were treated as recognized signs within this belief system. In addition, folklore held that fairies were poor at human reproduction, that a household in which a woman failed to conceive over many years could, within this understanding, be taken as further indication that substitution had occurred. Within this context, Bridget Cleary's circumstances were re-examined. Her illness had persisted. Her manner during questioning was described as harp or resistant. Her marriage had produced no children. Her independence prior to sickness, including her habit of earning money through dress making and millinery, was recalled and reconsidered within the customary thinking of the district. These features were not regarded separately, but as forming a pattern consistent with the presence of a changing rather than the woman previously known. Statements were then made openly within a house, asserting that Bridget Cleary herself had been taken. She was spoken of as being held elsewhere, while the figure lying in the bed was described as a substitute left in her place. Michael Cleary and Bridget's father were recorded as expressing this belief without hesitation. Within the setting of the house, these assertions were treated not as conjecture, but as explanation. From this belief followed a prescribed course of action. In folklore, a changing was said to be revealed or foresaid to withdraw through ordeal. Repeated questioning was used to compel admission, while prayer was intended to strip away deception. Bridget was required to state her name aloud and to affirm it under religious invocation. Witnesses later stated that although she answered, repetition was considered necessary as a fairy substitute was believed capable of false speech. Central to these measures was the use of fire. Within Irish folk belief, fire was regarded as hostile to fairies and capable of exposing or expelling them. Bringing a suspected changeling toward a hearth or threatening it with burning was believed to force the fairies to release the person they held. Fire was understood not only as a source of heat, but as a means of purification and compulsion. At intervals, Bridget was brought from the bed toward the hearth. Witnesses stated that she was held close to the fire while further prayers were said and questions continued. The fire served its ordinary domestic purpose, though its proximity was treated by those present as part of the procedure being followed. The door was kept closed for much of the night and smoke gathered within the room. Neighbors outside later stated that they heard raised voices and cries coming from a house during these hours. Michael Cleary then forced Bridget to the floor. According to testimony, Heck knelt upon her chest and applied pressure to her throat. The action was brief but decisive. Immediately afterwards, her outer clothing was removed, leaving only her chemise. A quantity of lamp oil was poured over her, and the lighted object taken from a fire was applied. Witnesses present later stated that flames rose quickly. During these moments, those in the room did not intervene. Johanna Burke later stated that Bridget turned toward her and called out by name. Michael Cleary then prevented those present from leaving the house, stating that what was taking place must be allowed to continue. He was heard to say that he had not intended the outcome and that God was aware of his purpose. When the fire had burned out, Bridget Cleary no longer showed signs of life. Her remains were wrapped in cloth and her limbs were drawn in. The body was left in the house for a short time, during which no effort was made to seek assistance. Those who had been present remained under instruction not to depart. Later, Michael Cleary and Patrick Kennedy carried the remains from the house and went out into the surrounding fields. According to later admissions, The body was buried in a shallow grave at some distance from the dwelling. Those who remained behind were kept in the house until the men returned. On the following day, Michael Cleary spoke to several neighbors regarding his wife's absence. Different explanations were offered at different times. To one, he stated that she had gone away during the night. To another, he said that she had been taken and that he expected her return. According to evidence, he visited a nearby raft during the night hours, remaining there for some time. No formal notice of disappearance was given to the authorities at this stage. As rumors circulated within the district, concern reached the local constabulary. Inquiries were made and officers attended at the house, which was found unoccupied. Inside, they observed articles off clothing showing signs of burning, including a woman's garment identified as belonging to Bridget Cleary. These findings were recorded, and the matter was reported to senior officers. A search of the surrounding area followed under the direction of District Inspector Wansborough. Constables and local men examined fields, ditches, and stretches of wet ground near the house. Ponds and streams were checked and dew holdings inspected. For several days, these efforts produced no result. The area was extensive and the ground uneven and overgrown in places. On the 22nd of March, the search was extended to a tract of land at some distance from the house, where ground cover was dense and the soil soft. There, Constable Samuel Summers and Sergeant Rogers observed a disturbance in the earth. Partially concealed by briars, on examination, they uncovered a shallow grave. Within it lay the remains of a woman. The body was removed with care and conveyed for examination. It was found to be unclothed apart from a stocking with a sack placed over the head. One gold earring remained in place. The condition of the remains was consistent with exposure to fire, and identification was made without difficulty. The discovery was reported immediately, and the search concluded. News of the findings spread quickly through the district. The house at Ballyvadley was secured, and those known to have been present during the preceding nights were sought for questioning. The disappearance of Bridget Cleary was no longer treated as a matter of uncertainty, but as a confirmed death requiring formal investigation. The inquest into the death of Bridget Cleary opened shortly after the discovery of the remains under the authority of John James Shea, who presided as coroner for the district. Proceedings were held locally, and a jury of 12 men was impaneled. The purpose, as stated at the outset, was to determine the cause of death and the circumstances in which it had occurred. Medical evidence was presented first. The doctor, Fernan, who had examined the remains, described their condition and injuries observed. That he stated that death was caused by extensive burns and that marks upon the throat were consistent with compression applied shortly before death. In his opinion, the injuries could not have been self-inflicted. He further noted that the body could not have survived the degree of burning observed. His findings were entered into the record without objection. Testimony then turned to those who had been present in the house during the night preceding the death. Johanna Burke gave evidence regarding events she had witnessed, including the administration of liquids, the repeated questioning of Bridget Cleary, and the actions of Michael Cleary on the second night. Her account was delivered in measured terms and confined to what she stated she had seen and heard. She did not offer interpretation beyond direct observation. William Simpson and Minnie Simpson also testified, describing their presence in the house during the earlier night. They spoke of prayers being said, of Bridget being held near the fire, and of raised voices within the room. Both witnesses stated that they had left before morning and had not been present in the following night. Their evidence was recorded as corroborative of certain details already given. Father Ryan was called and described his visits to the house. He stated that he had spoken with Bridget Cleary during her illness and that she appeared rational and capable of conversation. He confirmed that he had said Mass in the house on the day between the two nights. He reported no disturbance during his visits and stated that no complaint had been made to him by Bridget at those times. At the conclusion of the testimony, the coroner addressed the jury and reviewed the evidence presented. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict that Bridget Cleary had died from burns and injury to the throat inflicted by another person or persons. The verdict did not assign individual responsibility, and the matter was formally remitted to the criminal courts for further proceedings. The principal trial opened on the 3rd of July, 1895, at Clong Maleesizers before Mr. Justice O'Brien and a jury. The defendants were tried in connection with the events at Bailiff Lee. 5 individuals, including Michael Cleary, were arraigned on a charge-off murder, while others faced charges relating to assault and unlawful injury. The prosecution presented evidence drawn from the inquest and from police investigation. Medical testimony concerning the cause of death was entered into the record, confirming that Bridget Cleary had died as a result of burns and injury to the throat. Witnesses including Johanna Burke, William Simpson, Minnie Simpson, and Father Ryan were called to give their accounts of events during Bridget's illness and of what was observed in the house. Police officers described the search for the body and the circumstances of its discovery. For the defense, the central submission was that actions taken in the house had been guided by a belief in changelings rather than by an intention to kill. Michael Cleary's position, as recorded, was that he had not meant to take his wife's life, but had acted in the belief that the person before him was a substitute, and that the measures used would drive out the changeling and compel the return of the true Bridget. Counsel referred to traditional explanations concerning fairy interference and presented these beliefs as the context in which conduct had occurred. In his summing up, Mr. Justice O'Brien addressed the jury on the distinction between belief and legal responsibility. He stated that whatever explanations had been relied upon, the matter before the court concerned the death of a woman caused by the actions of others. Hefferther characterized the case as revealing a darkness not confined to one individual, but shared more widely, describing it as a darkness of mind, of morals, and even of religion. And he noted the part played by common superstition in the events proved in evidence. After deliberation, the jury returned its verdicts on the 5th of July, 1895, that Michael Cleary was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years penal servitude. Patrick Kennedy was sentenced to 5 years penal servitude, and John Dunn to 3 years. William Kennedy and James Kennedy each received sentences of 18 months. Michael Kennedy and Patrick Boland were sentenced to 6 months each. Mary Kennedy was discharged on grounds of age and infirmity, and William Mahern was acquitted. Each sentence was recorded formally and a court adjourned. The convicted men were removed to serve their terms, and the proceedings were concluded. Michael Cleary served a portion of his sentence and was later released from custody. After his discharge, he left Ireland and settled abroad. His movements were noted briefly in official documents and then ceased to be remarked upon. No further proceedings arose from the case, and no additional findings were entered into the court record. Those who had received lesser sentences returned to their districts, and the formal machinery of the law moved on to the matters. Within the local community, the house at Ballavati did not retain its former place. Over time, it passed into other hands, and its connection to the events of March 1895 became a matter of recollection rather than report. Some residents avoided reference to it altogether, while others spoke of Itonley in passing. The surrounding fields remained in use, and the paths leading away from the dwelling were worn by ordinary traffic. From time to time, Bridget Cleary's name surfaced again in discussion or publication, usually accompanied by reference to the period in which she lived. Such mentions did not alter the record. They served only to return attention briefly to a matter already settled by the courts. The house at Balavad Lee stood quiet. The hearth was cold, the doors long closed, and the road beyond it carried on as before. bearing no sign of events once confined within its walls.